Ring. Hey, Craig, it is May 29th, 2020, and this is, what is this show? On
This
the spot,
is This Week in Teams, the biweekly edition.
the bi-weekly edition. Actually, the Build edition. I like this one. We had Build a week and a half ago, and with how
You
busy
could have
we've
said
been
a
and
week
wanting to make
ago.
sure we covered them.
Nobody, if you'd
What?
just said a week ago, nobody would have written last week. You could have said last week, and it wouldn't have sounded as horrible.
All right. Well, anyway, so
Week
I've
and a
already
half
told
ago. It
them when it
started on
is.
Tuesday, and today's Friday, and it went through Thursday. So we'll just throw some days in there and see if people pay attention. But yeah,
It's
Build was the other
good.
day.
Build just happened.
Build just.
Why is Build important, Craig? I'm going to make you explain it as a Microsoft employee.
I wish I knew. No, Build is very important in the programming developer world because that's where Microsoft has their conferences for all the greatest stuff that's coming out for people who program, and now actually for the low-code solution programmers, because there was a lot of Power Automate and Power Platform stuff in there. So so that's where we do that, and we had some pretty big announcements coming out of that regarding Teams, because Teams is the hot platform lately.
Yes.
It
Now
was.
we're gonna. My apologies. I didn't mean to talk over you.
Oh, we do that all the time. We haven't gotten the exchange thing down very well. So,
We're trying. We're trying.
but obviously, Teams was supposed to be the hot platform, or that's what we were looking for at Microsoft. But then with the whole COVID thing coming down and a sudden shift from work to work from home for a lot more people than was expected, it became even hotter than what was planned. So, a lot of big news around that. A lot of things coming down the pipe.
Yep.
Or
Yeah.
pike. I
It
can't
was
ever. Is
definitely.
it pipe or pike?
It's the pike.
Okay.
Well, it could be the pipe. Oh, now you got me thinking. This is not a show about language, though, so we're going to move on.
All right.
So you mentioned Build is generally a much more technical conference. A lot more things around development, as you said, code and low code or no code now. So the first handful of things are much more back-end releases, lots of updates to the Graph API. The Graph API is how developers connect to Office 365, or at least the modern version. There are some older ways to connect as well. But it is the modern way you connect to Office 365, and it allows developers to connect in such a way that you are not creating grand poobah admins that have access to everything across your system. They're being granted specific privileges through these APIs.
Yes, that is exactly correct. Good job.
Thank you. So I have to explain that one in my job. So I've gotten somewhat good at it. So the updates to the Graph API means that the way you can interact with Teams is a lot better from an app perspective. Power Apps is a big one. I know you do a lot with Power Apps, so I'm going to let you talk about some of the changes that happen there.
Don't do that to me, Jay.
You're welcome. And with that update on Power Apps, oh man. One of the things in Power Apps that actually I saw that made me happy.
Yes.
Because if you've been around Microsoft for a long time, whether you're a techie or an end user, and Craig, I know you've experienced this, one application behaves slightly differently than another application, than yet another application. And it's because the devs have always been so siloed from each other,
Yes.
right? So the Word team built things differently than the Excel team, differently than the SharePoint team. And there are the occasional cross-platform things like the ribbon that came out back with, 2010, I think.
Yeah.
One of the things that came out here that made me really happy is the fact that they're adding a share with Teams or an add to Teams, they're adding an add to Teams button for Power Apps, which allows you to push your apps directly into Teams. They're also adding a share with Teams for things like Power BI, so that when you're in those interfaces, you can either push your apps or share Power BI dashboards right into Teams. And that makes me happy, because we're starting to see Teams become pushed back into the other pieces of Office 365.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So they're doing a lot of good stuff there, trying to make the Teams the platform for everything that you want to do with Office 365 and for the modern workplace. And they have added some extensions and stuff into Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio itself, to make it easier to access those APIs and the Graph APIs and be able to code and move your code and test in teams and things like that. So when you're building your apps and your bots and all that stuff, some stuff around there to make it a little bit easier for developers to actually push out code to teams and again use that as a platform for developing. You saw that a lot in 2010. SharePoint 2010 was a huge platform for development, and the problem was that everybody did like custom farm solutions, right?
Yes.
And now with the API calls and the app model has changed significantly since then. We're creating pieces that can just be plugged into teams and be used for teams, and using a lot of, like you said, ways of doing that look and feel the same way, so they get a very consistent look and feel to the
That's
apps.
Right. Yep.
So,
another thing on the power. Sorry.
A lot of work.
Yes, there is. Another thing that's coming on the Power Automate side, which I really appreciated because I just wrote an article about this. So Shifts for Teams, which is a employee schedule management tool set. Shifts for Teams in the GCC is rolling out shortly here. I wrote a blog article on avpoint.com/blogs, which talks about some use cases for Shifts and how you can use it for all sorts of things like analysts who work 24 hours, in 8-hour shifts can share information from one to the other. It's really neat. Anyway, Shifts being part of Teams with all the Graph API updates that are happening, and they're now actually putting in Power Automate actions as well. So if you're a Power Automate person, formerly Flow, you can now access that content from Shifts directly in Power Automate flows, which means you can interact with your schedule. For example, if you have a change in your schedule happen, you can kick off a workflow in the back end to notify people, to interact with whatever programmatic stuff you have going on. So really cool stuff there. Again, very much on the back end side of the house, very much on the technical heavy side, right?
Yeah, there's been a lot of work in the last few months for Power Automate triggers to come out of Teams and with Power Apps and being able to build the applications, the front ends, so that the Power Automate rolls. So I expect to see a lot more of that in the upcoming months too.
Yep. Also on the back end, this one took me a minute to think about, right? So if you use Teams, you log in with your Office 365 authentication, and then you can access everything across Office 365. But from an end user perspective, it's kind of annoying because if you click on a SharePoint thing from inside your team, you're usually prompted every couple of weeks with your authentication credentials, even though you're logged into Teams. So they actually announced single sign-on will pass through from Teams to those other capabilities. And SharePoint was the thing that they demoed in that, which made me happy because that's the thing that annoys me.
Yeah, because then you start, whenever you sign in, you usually get that little pop-up that says, do you want to make things easier, and we'll move your credentials around with you? But that doesn't always seem to work. So
exactly.
Hopefully it'll work better now.
Yeah, so the single sign-on is a big deal for end users. Everything else we've talked about is big deal for developers. It might affect end users depending on what they develop, but this one's a big deal for end users. Another one that I think is a big deal for end users is templates. Microsoft has had the idea of copying a team for a long time. When you're creating a new team, you can copy from an existing one that you have access to. AvePoint, we have always looked at templates as something that should be curated, something that IT can say, here's a project management template, here's a sales team template, here's a very secret Uber sharing information template. And so that idea of being able to curate it, well, that was an announcement at Build as well, is that they're creating that concept of IT curated templates.
I've always, sorry, didn't mean to, thought you were pausing there.
No, I'm pausing for you. I
have to tell my clients that basically to create those templates that you want yourself, right? And then you can push them out, but you still get the choice of picking everything you have access to copy. So there's not a really good way to curate it, as you would say. So hopefully they're put some controls on that too, so that you can only have, so you can create select templates and then list only those templates that are there.
Yeah, that's my understanding from this release, is that it's actually letting IT do that curation. So it goes from what you had your customers do, which is create a blank template or create a blank team, and then just tell people to search for the word template or something.
Yeah.
This is going that step further, and the interface looks pretty neat in being able to select the right template. And it uses on the back end, this is worth knowing, I think, it uses on the back end the site design concept. Site designs are really cool. It's been frustrating to me because if you, as a developer, as a company that develops for Office 365, we have to make changes to SharePoint after a team has been updated. And the way Office 365 provisions, you don't always know when something's going to provision.
Right.
It may take 5, 10, 15 minutes to happen. So site templates is a way that Microsoft has allowed you to push into that provisioning process by adding little things to the site templates. And this utilizes the site templates as well. So it's really good. It's a good thing. You'll have to trust me on this one.
I trust you, Jay. Hopefully everybody else does too.
Someone's got to. All right, Craig, I'm going to put pressure on you. What do you want to talk about next?
What do we got? We've got a couple different things. More pop-outs coming. So if you should see the pop-out chats right now, so if you're in there and you want to click on pop-out, you can pop-out chat. At Build, they announced pop-out apps. So if you got apps, those should start popping out. Those will take a little bit of time. Also pop-out meetings. So when you're actually having a meeting, that pops out and you can move that screen over to a different screen and you can still use Teams, which was pretty cool as an end user wanting to be able to do that. I know a favorite of yours is contextual search, because right now in Teams, when you just do a search, you've got to search the whole thing. And then you can filter. But actually, a lot of people don't know about filtering. So I always demo that when I'm talking to clients and show them how to filter. And they go, oh, that makes life so much easier. But now that you can hit like a Control F and say, hey, I want to search this team, right? That is going to be awesome when that's released.
Yeah. Contextual search makes me super excited. And so, like Craig said, in fact, we should do a quick tip on filtering. Filtering makes searching really awesome. You type your keyword in the search box in Teams, and then you click the filter button and you say, search in this channel, search by things by this person. But the contextual, the fact that it's going to be able to say, hey, you're in this team. Is this where you want your search to start? I'm very excited about that. That's been missing for a long time.
And I've heard it from a lot of people. So you're not the only one that's going to be happy about that.
Oh, man. I'm going to go out of order. Well, let's leave that next one until last. The new bookings app for meetings is pretty cool. I'm curious to see exactly what it's going to mean. But as a prime example, my parents are in their 70s. They do a lot of doctor's appointments right now, and they've been doing a lot of Zoom appointments, which is now that Zoom has some more security around it, which is pretty cool. So my dad doesn't have to leave the house during a COVID-19 pandemic. He can meet the doctor remotely, and they can go over blood work or whatever they're going over. And that's actually a key example that they talked about during this release is doctor's appointments, being able to support scheduling appointments and being able to have that lobby or waiting room or something like that too.
And I believe the key component in that was being HIPAA compliant, if I saw that. So, that's one of the drawbacks is how can we still be compliant? Can we still be secure? And can we still share those information? So that should be sweet. Yep.
And then the next to last one we'll talk about. So this one's a little bit more on the technical side again. For organizations that do a lot of broadcasts using Teams, they are putting in NDI and Skype TX interoperability, which are new terms to me. So that's why I'm not going into them in depth. But the point of it is they're going to increase the ability to have live broadcast production stuff, such as virtual stages, which I think is a really good next step. We do a lot of live broadcasts using Teams. I was part of a 36-hour thing yesterday, or the last 2 days, called the M365 Virtual Marathon, where they had like 300 presenters present over 400 sessions, and they used Teams Live. So to be able to kick these production capabilities in there that you have with other platforms, I think is really very cool.
Yeah, that should be really interesting. So looking forward to seeing how that rolls out.
All right. And then to bring us back to the end user, I'm very excited about this as well. This is called Lists. It's Office 365 Lists. If what I like about it is it's going to give you, as an end user, the ability to make, manage, curate lists, share them with other people. And, if you're familiar with the back end at all, you could already do most of this with SharePoint lists within site collections. But the UI enhancements on this really make it a powerful end user tool set.
Yeah, being able to update the UI, be able to use some templates. There's some templates that's going to be coming with it. I saw like a scheduling template,
Yep.
an event management template, being able to create a list from Excel, and then just
Yep.
embedded in your team is actually what's really cool about that. So it's taking the SharePoint list, so to speak, that lives always in SharePoint, but just being able to surface it much easier in Teams than what had been done before. And I think that's going to be, our lists were already huge with SharePoint. So
Right.
just being for that forefront in the Teams will just explode the use of those.
Yeah, I've always felt like SharePoint lists with the workflow management capabilities that can key off of those entries has always been super strong. So the fact that Microsoft is taking what generally took a SharePoint developer and puts it into the hands of the end users is actually what we've been trying to talk about, the power of SharePoint, for a decade now.
Yes,
So
exactly.
it's really exciting for us to see Microsoft push that power to the end user. One thing that's interesting to me is I haven't seen technically how they're doing it, because you're going to be able to create lists that are not associated with a SharePoint site collection, which makes me think that they're going to associate with your OneDrive
That's exactly how
instead.
you do it. So if you're just creating your own list, it's saved into your OneDrive. Sorry about that.
No, I love it. I love it. I'm excited because I was right.
You were right, Jay. Yes, no, that's exactly.
Not often.
What I haven't been able to see is how you would then move that, or if you can move that, or if that's
Yeah,
just
if you're going to start
personal.
sharing it with other people, is it just explicit permissions, or can you tie it to a group or something like that?
It looks like when I've been playing with it, explicit permissions, although you haven't seen it. No, I've got a preview version of that I've been playing with, and it's sharing explicit permissions, but
It's
I
okay,
have
Craig.
to
We know you're a Microsoft employee. We get
I
it.
have to believe that we will be eventually able to migrate that out to a SharePoint site.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, that's exciting. That is everything I had from news and updates from Microsoft Teams over the last 2 weeks. This is a particularly long episode. I think we're around 25, 30 minutes. I really appreciate if you made it this long. I suspect over the next month or two, you're going to hear us repeat some of these items as more details come out, as they start to roll out towards beta and general availability. And hopefully to my friends on the government side, to the GCC, I know I'm praying for you. But thank you. One thing I want to add, I'm going to lower my camera a little bit. So in the month of June, AvePoint has our industry Shift Happens conference. This is from last year. I'm going to be speaking at it. We've got some really great presentations on Office 365 adoption and rolling out the tool sets. It is not an AvePoint product concept conference. So don't roll your eyes, Craig. Not that hard. It's for everybody. It's free, which is my favorite part, and it's virtual. So I don't care if you're in DC, where I am, or if you're in Chicago with Craig, or if you're out at the mothership in Seattle. You can attend. So go to shifthappenscon.com. I'll make sure we pimp it out on our. That's a terrible use of language. And we'll make sure we advertise it on our social media. I'm going to
okay.
stop there.
No negative
Craig.
connotations assigned with that word. But no, good. Yeah, there's a ton of great speakers, and Dux, I assume, will be presenting, and he's always entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
As well as, I'm guessing, some key Microsoft people like Jeff Tepper and
Yes.
those
Yeah.
people. So
There are, yeah. There's a handful of Microsoft people that are helping kick this off. And then actually my favorite part about it is almost every presentation is a pair between a technical subject matter expert and a customer. So the
Oh, sweet.
presentations you are hearing are really case studies and how do we do them. So that's what I really like about. I'm actually speaking with a gentleman from the city of Seattle, talking about governance and Office 365 and Teams rollouts. So really
Yeah, those are
valuable.
really, really powerful because I always get people like asking, well, how does so and so do it? How do other companies do it? So
Yep.
it's nice to hear it straight from another
This is
company's mouth.
literally all about how other people do it. All right, cool. Craig, thank you as always. Very good conversation.
Nice
And
talking
again,
to you, Jay.
yes, and it's nice talking at you to our 700 or 500 listeners.
All right. Have a nice day and a great weekend, and see you in June.
There it is.